You're listening to the Divorce and Your Money Show, the #1 divorce podcast in the United States, trusted by hundreds of thousands of people nationwide. I'm your host, Sean Lehman, MBA and certified divorce financial analyst. You can visit us at divorceandyourmoney.com. And when you get there, you'll have access to tons of amazing resources, including booking a coaching call with me directly, or you can visit our store where you can get access to almost 200 episodes of the Divorce and Your Money podcast. In this episode, we're going to discuss how to divorce a narcissist and when, or I should say, at least survive the divorce process and really come in one piece and come through the situation in the best position possible, given a particularly difficult spouse to handle during the divorce process. And the reason I bring this topic up, I haven't talked about it in a while, and through the coaching calls I've had over the past few weeks, many of you are identifying that your spouses have some form of pretty severe or extreme narcissism and are wondering and have been asking, well, how do I deal with that? And what kind of strategies can I employ? And what are some things that I should be thinking about? And I'll say, of course, individual circumstances always matter. And if you want to talk about your case, we can do that via a coaching call. But I also want to give you some general tips and strategies and things to think about. And also for those who haven't really thought about narcissism with any depth and thinking about that in the context of your spouse, I want to go through some of the characteristics of what someone with narcissistic personality disorder, what a narcissist is, and then also go through really just 3 very specific strategies to help you get through that situation. And so let's first start with what a narcissist is. And the technical term, you heard me mention it earlier, is narcissistic personality disorder. It is a disorder, and it does have a clinical and psychological definition that's very specific. And I'm going to actually read off some of the symptoms of that. One of the things I do want to bring up, though, is it's a continuum. So if what that means is some people would score, if I want to keep the language simple, some people might score 100 out of 100. They are an extreme narcissist, but some of us, including some of us listening, still have forms of narcissism. We all do, but we might be a 5, or we might be a 10, or might be a 20, but your spouse could be an 80 or a 90 or 100, or I bet some of you think your spouse might be off the charts. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the definition of some of the symptoms. These come from the Mayo Clinic website, and it says that people with narcissistic disorder can have some of the following. And I know some of you are going to be nodding your heads as you listen to these descriptions. So here we go. So people with the disorder can have an exaggerated sense of self-importance, have a sense of entitlement and require constant, excessive admiration, expect to be recognized as superior without achievements that warrant it, exaggerate their achievements and talents, be preoccupied with fantasies about success, power, brilliance, beauty, or the perfect mate, believe they are superior and only can associate with equally special people, monopolize conversations and belittle or look down on people they perceive as inferior, expect special favors and unquestioning compliance with their expectations, take advantage of others to get what they want, have an inability or unwillingness to recognize the needs and feelings of others, be envious of others and believe others envy them, behave in an arrogant or haughty manner, coming across as conceited, boastful, and pretentious, insist on having the best of everything. And that is the first set of characteristics. Believe it or not, there are more. But I know just from that reading, some of you have a pretty clear sense and probably know where those behaviors come in with your spouse. And maybe it's not your spouse and that wouldn't be relevant to the divorce context, but I know we all have friends or might know some people in popular culture who you can clearly identify these characteristics with. I will not name any names, but I think it's pretty obvious for some. Now, the definition from the Mayo Clinic also has some other characteristics, they say, and it says people with narcissistic personality disorder have trouble handling anything they perceive as criticism. That's very important. And they can become impatient or angry when they don't receive special treatment. Now, I'm just going to give you all a little insight into me. That one definitely falls in my category. I do love special treatment, and that one's me. But anyways, other things is that they have significant interpersonal problems and feel slighted, react with rage or contempt and try to belittle the other person or make themselves appear superior, have difficulty regulating emotions and behavior, experience major problems dealing with stress and adapting to change, feel depressed and moody because they feel short of perfection, and have secret feelings of insecurity, shame, vulnerability, or humiliation. That's a lot. That is a ton of different things. But in conversations I have with you every day, I know a lot of you are living with spouses that share these characteristics. And these are daily behaviors that you are living with, and you're trying to figure out how this process is going. And one of the extra challenges with someone who shares these narcissistic characteristics is that most narcissists don't think that anything is wrong with them. And one of the challenges with diagnosing narcissistic personality disorder is someone who is a narcissist will not sit down to be diagnosed, and they won't think that anything is wrong. And in the divorce process in particular, which is what we're talking about, it really drags on the divorce process because everything becomes bigger than it needs to be. Now, well, I'm not saying that the issues that you're facing in divorce are small. They are big, but what happens is usually you, the person who are listening, has pretty reasonable expectations and needs and wants during this process. Whereas dealing with the narcissist can be just complicated, and their expectations are the opposite of unreasonable. Every time you force them to give an inch or ask that they give an inch, they overreact, I should say, kind of in an out of control manner, and it just becomes a much bigger fight than necessary. And compounding that is, I like to say, I had this funny thing. One of my first jobs I had when I was working on Wall Street, I was a financial advisor at a very good firm, and there were lots of financial advisors working there. And I noticed something very interesting that applies to the narcissist in the divorce context. What was interesting is the personality of the financial advisors. Their clients would also share a similar personality to that advisor. And what do I mean by that? So there would be a financial advisor who was very ADD, always wanted things really snappy, kind of all over the place. And when their clients called, their clients were the same way. Very ADD, a little bit all over the place, kind of snappy. And that was interesting. And then conversely is there would be an advisor there, and he would be very thoughtful, very deep thinker, very analytical, relatively quiet, not kind of a big sales personality. And when that person's clients called, that's what they were like, the clients. They were generally very thoughtful, very analytical, very deep thinkers. And it was interesting is because I was sitting around, 20 or 30 very successful financial advisors. And in general, all of their clients matched their personalities. And it was one of the weirdest things I had noticed. And why do I bring this up? Well, in the divorce context, it turns out that narcissists tend to find lawyers and with those same personality traits. So what could have been even a reasonable process becomes that much harder because not only is the spouse suffering on the scale of narcissism to an extreme degree, but their attorneys are often further complicating that situation rather than helping it. It turns out at least in my experience, I can't speak for everyone, but oftentimes those with narcissistic personality disorder tend to have very narcissistic attorneys who are just a pain and a half to deal with. I can't stand them, to be quite frank. Least favorite people to deal with in the legal process. I don't mind a mean attorney. I don't mind any form of attorney except for the narcissistic ones. I can deal with the mean ones, but those who are just full of themselves and have clients who are equally that level are the biggest pain. And I think if you were to talk to any very good divorce attorney, they would say the exact same thing. And every town and every city across America, there are attorneys who share these capabilities and also attract those very frustrating clients who are probably like your spouse if you're listening to this. Now, all that said, let's shift gears a little bit. And what do you do? And what are the strategies? And I'm really just going to go through 3 strategies that you can put into place to deal with the narcissist during the divorce process. And I like to only discuss 3 strategies because if you focus on these 3 things, you will be focused on the right things. And actually, I use the word focus because one of the challenges with dealing with a narcissist is small things become big and you can quickly lose sight of the big picture. Or as I like to say, you can't see the forest for the trees. And so I only want you to focus on a few things. And if you focus on those few things, you will get through in the grand scheme of things in the best position possible. So what are those 3 things? The first is document everything and get organized. The second is make sure you get an experienced attorney. And the third is you're the CEO, remove emotions from this process. Now I'm going to get into each one of these 3 things. And intentionally, this is a little bit longer episode because I think it's a very important one. And I'm going to go through these 3 topics. First one, document everything and get organized. Even though you're dealing with a narcissistic spouse, it's only one part of the process. And you still have everything that you're dealing with in divorce. Your spouse's personality characteristics are just something on top of that. It's a little frustrating, but you still have to deal with all the custody issues, hidden assets, and willingness to compromise, trying to come up with a settlement agreement. And so one of the things that really helps during this process is not only staying organized, but documenting everything that's going on and everything that's happening. And when I say document everything that's happening is it can be overwhelming trying to keep up with all of the major events in your divorce process, particularly with a narcissistic spouse. And sometimes I'll talk to you or work with you over a long period of time, and you'll have 100 specific examples of things that have happened. And of those 100 examples, it's just really hard to keep track, like what's going on, because you're living with these things, but we're trying to help you from the outside and trying to catch up on these stories and make sure that we do the best we can for you. And so here's what I suggest you do when dealing with a narcissistic spouse is you put together a timeline, a very, very simple timeline in chronological order of the things that are happening. And if you have evidence of those things, you supply the evidence of them. And I really mean 1 or 2 pages of just the main things in the divorce. What would I do? I would take a document or a spreadsheet or write it by hand. You put the date. So you're going to put June 4th in the year, and you're going to say, spouse yelled at me for this, and this happened or whatever. Or you're going to say, and then you're going to say June 18th, X amount of money was suspiciously withdrawn from bank account, unsure of where it went. And you're going to put behind that is you're going to put a bank statement with that withdrawal on June. I forgot what date I already said, but we'll say June 20th. And then you're going to go to July and say in July, kids were with spouse. They did not eat for 18 hours, according to them, came home hungry, no food, and were unhappy. And you're going to write that down. You might say on July 17th, and whatever happened. And if you might say police were called. Sometimes that happens with many of you. You'll say, here's the police copy of the police report. And whatever the different things are, I'm just making up those examples off the top of my head, but you'll have a very simple timeline with the date, one sentence or two sentences of what happened. And if you have evidence of it, any evidence of what happened, might be text messages, might be photos, might be bank statements, might be any number of things that could have happened. And you're just going to put that together in one file and keep it organized. The most frustrating thing about dealing with a narcissist is it can be very isolating for you and very overwhelming for us trying to help you. And so the goal is, and I'm going to talk about each of those. Let me talk about overwhelming for a second. So many things are going on. It's hard for me or hard for your attorney to keep things straight sometimes in terms of all of these different things that happen. If you have proof of them, if they're relevant for the divorce process, if they're he said, she said type things. And we just need to keep them in order. So maybe we show this to a judge later, or maybe something's not relevant, or maybe it is particularly relevant, but we need to be able to keep those things straight. The other thing that's relevant about that is I said it can be very isolating. The other thing that's many things are particularly frustrating with dealing with narcissists, but almost universally, narcissists are loved, except by their family. Or I should say their spouse in particular. And I know that everyone who might interact with your spouse might love that person. They might think, oh, Johnny's great, or oh, Jill is awesome. Love getting a beer with Jill, or have a great relationship with Johnny. Always say hi to him. I know he's the best. Always walking around the restaurant or walking around town, greeting people, and everyone knows who they are. And very well liked, but when they come home, they're a terror to you and they don't treat you well. And it's awful. And it's very isolating because you might feel that people don't believe that this person is actually, not as good as everyone thinks. And so one of the ways to combat that is to really prepare yourself and document all of these things that are happening. If you have evidence of these things that are happening and documented clearly, it's easy to change the narrative in this divorce process about who that person is and really get the truth about them out and advocate yourself and fight back. Narcissists are often bullies, but and they like to yell and scream and everything else, but there is a truth that is happening, and you can expose that truth when you have the appropriate evidence together. A lot about point number one, document everything, get organized. That is crucial in this process. Point number two is get an experienced attorney. Now, I talk about attorneys a lot on this show, and I don't have a ton additional things to add, but I do want to talk about an attorney in the context of the divorce process. Now, my last episode was how to find an attorney if you don't know anyone. So listen to that. Also in the store, if you get the quick start guide, I have a big section on how to manage and improve your relationship with your attorney. And even with some of the coaching clients, particularly those I work with over a longer basis, I'll help you strategize. Well, what's the best communication process with this attorney and how do we do it effectively? And so what I wanted to bring up, though, is if you follow my resources on picking an attorney, one of the questions, if you know, and from listening to this episode, doing some additional research, and you figure out that your spouse really has some pretty severe narcissistic tendencies, well, that really comes into play as you pick your attorney. And in particular, in your initial consultation, you should be asking, well, one is you should have this beautiful timeline that's clearly documented. You should say, look, I'm dealing with a narcissistic spouse. One question you should ask, have you dealt with spouses like this before? Do you have strategies in place? How do you feel like we should approach this given the information we have? If this were to go in front of a judge, what do you think? Will the cost of this divorce be more because of the nature of my spouse? Can you tell me how things would change or what I should be thinking about? Will the length of time be longer because of my spouse? If my spouse weren't like this, would you have a different approach? These are kind of questions that you should be asking your attorney during your initial consultation or your early consultations, because it can be very relevant as you think about who you hire as your divorce attorney. Now, I know some of you will look for attorneys that specialize in narcissism or will have it on their website. I'll tell you this, that's probably not the best method. Most attorneys that I know that are very good, that I work with, who are super experienced, they don't necessarily have a section of their website dedicated to narcissistic spouses. That said, I guarantee you they have all dealt with them all the time, because that is just part of this process and part of what they do. So just because someone's website doesn't say it, I wouldn't say that's a cause for concern. I would just look for a generally very good, very competent attorney, and I promise you they will have seen it dozens or hundreds of times, unfortunately. So the second thing was get an experienced attorney. Now, the third thing is you are the CEO of your divorce. Now remove your emotions from this process. Much easier said than done. But let me tell you what I'm getting at. Whether you are a stay-at-home mom or dad, or maybe you're the one who was out working, it doesn't really matter. If you were a stay-at-home parent and you've been running the household this whole time for the last 2 years or 25 years, whatever it is, you have been the CEO, the chief executive officer of your household. If you've been the one at work every day for the last 2 or 25 years, however long you've been married, you have been the financial earner out after it, earning the money and earning the lifestyle. Whatever the case is, you have a lot more experience and a lot more capabilities than you probably give yourself credit for. And when it comes to dealing with a narcissist or a narcissistic spouse, one of the things that you should be doing is really treating this divorce process as if you are the CEO of this divorce process, which you are. And you have many more skills, regardless of what your spouse might say to you. Oftentimes they're trying to belittle you, or they're berating you, or they're just a terror at home. I get it. But it doesn't lower your individual value. And it actually, you have a lot more to it than you think, and a lot more skills than you think. And so when it comes to deciding what the best courses of action are during the divorce, you need to take that individual person out of it. Sometimes, to the extent you can. It's almost impossible to remove emotions from the process, but go to therapists, talk to friends. I give lots of different advice in this podcast or via the quick start guide in the store, or via coaching calls on this subject. But the point is when you try and decide what's best for you, you need to treat it through the lens of, all right, this divorce process will end one day. It might not feel like it now. For some of you, it might be a few months, and for others, it might be a few years. But whatever that time period is, it will be over at some point. And really, your main goals should be, well, when this process is over, I'm going to have 10 or 30 or 50 or 70 years life left ahead of me. How do I make the smartest decisions today regarding my finances, regarding my kids, regarding my family today that will set me up for the next 10 or 20 or 50 or 70 years of life? And when you think about those decisions, you have to take the emotions out of them. You have to think, well, what are the dollars and cents? What are realistically the best options for me, my children? If I were a third party thinking about this, and if I were giving myself advice 10 years from now or 20 years from now, what would I say to myself today as I go through this process? Or what advice should I be getting from a third party that will really If I were just this boss of this process, the CEO of this process, what decisions would I be making to get me through it? And if you make decisions from emotions, your emotions can easily lead you astray during this time. But if you make your decisions through logic, you can start to cut through all the fluff, cut through the bullying, cut through the rough nights, cut through all of this and really focus on, hey, here's what I want. Here are my 3 goals, or here are my 5 goals. I've talked about goals on this in the podcast. Here's what I want for my future. And I know he or she is going to say this or that or whatever in this process, but that doesn't matter. Here's what I'm focused on. Here's what I'm going to fight for myself. Here's what I need to get through this process in one piece. And that is what I'm going to fight for, regardless of what my spouse decides to do or tries to do. Because I'm the CEO. I'm the boss of this process, and I'm going to myself in the best position possible for my future and for my kids' future. And when you start to adopt that attitude, you will really shift the way that you think about dealing with divorce with a narcissist. And it will be a much better position for you, for the future, and for the long term, in setting up things the way that you need to set them up. And you will be putting yourself in a position to fight back and to make the smartest decisions you can to put yourself into a position to get you into a good spot, not just for the next 6 months or for the next year, but really for the rest of your life. So, as I said, 3 pieces of advice for dealing with a narcissist. The first is document everything and get extra organized. The second is make sure you get an experienced attorney who has the knowledge and strategic thought and thinking and knows how to handle a narcissist. And the third is remember that you are the CEO of this process and you need to treat yourself as such. Try to use logic and smart thinking over emotions during this process, even though it is a tough time for you, unquestionably. But know that if you think about it the smartest way possible, you will get through this process in one piece, and you will get yourself through this process in a position to set yourself up for a great future. Before you go, I want to make sure that you have some awesome resources that are sure to help you during the divorce process. You can find them all at divorceandyourmoney.com. The first thing is you can book a one-on-one coaching call directly with me. All you do is click on the coaching page or go to divorceandyourmoney.com/coaching, and you will have direct access to my calendar to book a time. And during the coaching calls, they're 30 minutes long, and we can discuss whatever is most pressing to you. Sometimes people call and say, am I making the right decisions during this process? They'll say, is my attorney doing a good job? Can I get a second opinion from you? Sometimes someone will say, well, is this what I should be asking for during the negotiations? Or one of my favorite things to do is come up with some creative solutions to splitting assets that you might not have thought about. Sometimes you'll say, well, does this settlement that I'm looking at that's on the table make sense for me, for my kids, for my future? Does it make sense for the long term? Or are there other issues that I'm just not thinking about that I should be as part of the divorce process? You can book those calls with me. We'll speak directly. They're very affordable, and we get into the issues that matter most to you. I look forward to speaking with you there. That's divorceandyourmoney.com/coaching. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is the store, where I have lots of excellent resources to help you. My favorite resource of all of them is the podcast archives. Now, only a few of the episodes are available for anyone to download. In the archives, you can get almost 200 episodes of the Divorce and Your Money podcast. And what's great about it is that the episodes are organized into easy to understand topics. So if you just have questions about your house, there is a great section of several episodes, 7 or 8 episodes, for just on things about the house. Or if you have questions about post-divorce finances, things that you should be planning for, how to choose a financial advisor, that's in there too. If you want to have a section just on how to manage and have the best relationship possible with your divorce attorney, we have a section on that there. Or any number of things in the divorce process. There are many hours of information, and I've never had to give a refund on it because it is perhaps the most useful resource worth many, many thousands of dollars that I give to you for a very low price. So you can check that there in the store. DivorceandYourMoney.com is where you can get anything and get access to me. And I look forward to speaking with you soon.